We are back with you once again to talk about the Brendan Banfield double murder trial. This is a high-profile case going on in Fairfax County. We welcome you in to our streaming right now, and we're going into day 6. This is week 2. We're expecting this to go on for 4 weeks. Let's talk about bring people up to speed and also what Brendan Banfield is facing at the moment.
Right, so Brendan Banfield, he's on trial for murder. He's facing 4 counts of aggravated murder, 1 count of using a firearm to commit a felony, 2 counts of child abuse with disregard for life, and 1 count of child cruelty.
So a slew of charges, and if convicted, facing life in prison.
Exactly.
Juliana Peres, who was the au pair, took admitted guilt and took a lesser charge for involuntary manslaughter. Yes. And she's facing obviously some years in prison if convicted, but as part of this plea deal, she is to testify for the prosecution against her ex-lover, Brendan Banfield.
Right.
And I think for those of you watching, you're sort of up to speed on the lay of this case. So let's dive into what happened yesterday. I want to ask you first about, everyone was anticipating Christine Banfield's father, Gary, taking the stand. I was expecting to hear an emotional testimony. I wanted to hear more about how this has impacted the family, more about Christine, the marriage, and there's a child involved here, right? At the time, 4-year-old girl. And I wanted to hear more about that, but we did not hear that. Instead, it was a very short testimony and straight to the point. What did we gain out of him taking the witness stand?
Yeah, so Annie, the focus was really that from the prosecution, they were asking Gary Benson about her childhood, talking to him about her injuries that she would get as a child, talking about nosebleeds, how she bruised easily, and the focus of their conversation was on how she would get hurt a lot as a child and into her adult years. We do have some of my conversation with Frank, our legal expert on this, if we're able to play some of that, but he was able to explain a little bit about why the prosecution may have posed those questions rather than taking that emotional direction.
And I think that's good because viewers are wondering what was with the questioning, what was he suggesting or she suggesting, so let's listen in here.
Why was that the question the prosecutors asked him?
I'm speculating.
Yeah.
It was interesting. We thought they would end with something emotional, right? We talked about that at the last break. My speculation is that because she had a blood disorder and bruised easily, and her dad, who seems like a completely wonderful person in the world, has indicated that she has had these physical problems for a long time, since she was a child, that she didn't play any contact sports, she didn't take part in anything that was of a super physical nature. I don't want to jump to what the prosecutor was trying to do there, but perhaps they were suggesting that a person with those types of physical limitations would not necessarily want to engage in the type of adult activity that is at issue here. That she was not one to perhaps participate in the type of fantasy activity that's involved in this case. Someone with that type of fragile condition. So kind of dancing around this issue a little bit, but I think that's what they were getting at.
All right, so that was Frank Salvedo. He's our legal expert. He'll be back today during the lunch break to take some of your questions at home. And if you do have questions, there's a number you can text, 202-895-5599. That's 202-895-5599, and he will be there to answer those questions that a lot of people have.
Yeah, so continue to send in your questions. We also see your questions on our YouTube channel, and I know you tried to get to a few of them.
Yeah.
This is obviously a high interest case, and a lot of you have been following this very closely. I want to also talk about yesterday. So there were a total of 2 witnesses that took the stand. It was Christine's father, Gary, alongside Iris Dallygraph.
Yes.
And Iris is a bloodstain expert. So she spent hours dissecting and going over the blood splatter, the crime scene. What did we learn from her testimony?
You know, I was talking to Sophie, our digital producer, who's been in the courtroom alongside Matthew Torres, and she was saying we saw the jurors really starting to lose attention span. She was up there for a while, and at points it was pretty boring. But I do want to talk about towards the end, it did get pretty interesting, especially when the prosecution was asking her specifically about Joseph Ryan, if he would have been able to get up after he had been initially shot. And that first shot, because remember, he was shot twice, once by Brendan Banfield, once by Juliana Peres Magalhães. She was explaining that he could have potentially gotten up after that first shot, but that second shot he would not have been able to move. And then the other big topic she was asked about was, we heard from Detective Leach, one of the officers who arrived, that in the body camera footage he could see that Joseph Ryan was, when officers arrived initially, that he was on the ground with his arms crossed over his chest. And the question was, could he have naturally fallen after being shot into that position? So really what we're seeing is the prosecution trying to line up their narrative that Brendan Banfield moved the bodies after what happened.
That's what prosecutors are suggesting, I think, by having Iris come on to talk about the blood pattern. It's suggesting that the body had been staged or moved. Okay, so that's what we learned out of Iris's. Today, let's take viewers back to last week. It was week one, the start of this trial on Tuesday. Really, it was opening statements, and we heard from a slew of witnesses, at least a dozen from the prosecution side.
And it was impressive because we got through so many people. We're only in week two, but on day one of opening statements. It was an aggressive
start.
Yeah, so we do have some highlights for you from opening statements. If we could play that for you, you will hear both the defense and the prosecution kind of introducing the jurors to the case.
It's the Commonwealth versus Brendan Banfield. Mr. Banfield is present in the courtroom with his attorney, and the Commonwealth is present.
We're here today because Brendan Banfield, the man seated behind me, killed his wife, Christine Banfield, and another man named Joseph Ryan.
The murder of Christine Banfield by Joe Ryan occurred on February 24th, 2023.
They sneak up the stairs to the bedroom where they hear Joe Ryan and Christine. Brendan enters the bedroom first, shooting Joe in the head, picks up the knife that Joe had brought, and stabs Christine repeatedly in the neck. He directs Juliana to shoot Joe a second time with her gun. Brendan spends the next several minutes manipulating Joe Ryan's body, in the process leaving Christine's blood on Joe's hands and pants.
The arrest of Juliana Peres Magalhães took place in October of 2023. And the whole reason she was arrested was to flip her against my client. You won't hear any dispute as to the relationship between Brendan Banfield and Juliana Peres Magalhães. But there's an awful lot more to look for, ladies and gentlemen.
The blood puts Brendan Banfield standing over Christine, stabbing her in the neck until she died. While Juliana presents us with the narrative, it is the blood evidence that you can rely upon without a doubt.
Digital forensics doesn't lie. People lie. And there are going to be plenty to see.
All right, so those were opening statements, some of the highlights there. It lasted less than, right around a half an hour, which was kind of surprising.
It was surprising. Also surprising was the number of people called to the stand. We heard from the first responders that were first on scene that morning of February 24th. We heard from a number of detectives, right, and police
forensic
officers.
Investigators. Yeah.
Right. So I understand we also have a review of that as well.
One of the initial people to take the stand was Juliana Peres Magalhães, the au pair. So we do have some highlights of some of the testimony we heard last week, and then when we come back, we will talk about what happened yesterday and what you can expect today.
I need help. There is my friend. She just was stuck in the night now. She's bleeding a lot.
My name is Brendan Banfield. I'm a federal agent. This is my house. There's somebody here. I shot him.
What did you see when you went into the bedroom?
At first glance, I saw a female that was nude. She was covered in blood, with a gentleman standing over her with bloody hands.
Who is the shooter? Who shot who?
Brendan, he's an officer.
He first asked, does he have a pulse? He did follow up with, is she breathing? Or is she going to be okay? Was what he said.
What's going on this morning?
Brendan said, no, police don't drop the knife, and he was saying, I'm gonna kill her, I'm gonna kill her. And I don't know, he started stabbing her. I think Brendan shot him.
Initially, we walked outside, allowed the first ambulance to leave, and then Mr. Banfield was taken into a second ambulance.
What, if anything, did you see him do while you were in the hospital room with him?
He washed his hands.
And before he washed his hands, had anyone swabbed his hands to preserve samples of blood that were on his hands?
No, I was trying to be empathetic.
Yes. No, I understand. Was there anybody who told you not to do that?
No, sir.
This case under penalty of law.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, you can have a seat.
What I told the detectives that day, it was the version Brendan had told me. Brendan said he yelled, police officer, and she yelled back at Brendan saying, Brendan, he has a knife. That's when Brendan first shot Joe. He got on top of her, and that's when I first saw him stabbing her with a knife. And I just start telling him, he's moving, he's behind you, and that's when I fired the shot too.
Did you see him interacting with Joe or Christine after you shot Joe?
Well, he was still stabbing Christine, and he got her blood, a handful of blood, and he starts dripping on Joe's body.
You asking the ladies and gentlemen of the jury to believe that you came out during that time frame because you wanted the truth to be known versus any time the year before that?
Well, the fact that I took a year to accept my plea, it does not mean that I didn't have any intention to tell the truth before. I had a video call with the producer who works with Netflix, and they want to make a movie or documentary about my case, and he explained in terms of compensation. So they were thinking about $10,000, but I want to negotiate. I want more than this.
You were charged with murder because you shot someone. Am I wrong?
No, you're not.
And so why would you deserve something because of that?
Not because of that. I didn't say that I deserved something because of what I did.
I didn't hear any details, so feel free to tell me why.
I'm saying for after, when this is over, for me and my family. And again, for everything we've been through.
All right, so those were some of the highlights of last week's testimony. We obviously heard a bunch of testimony yesterday. We've heard from more investigators, more forensics investigators, but the prosecution, they rested their case last night. It now goes into the hands of the defense.
It goes into the hands of the defense, and now the defense will dispute many of these claims that occurred last week and yesterday. So it should get interesting. Do we know how many witnesses John Carroll is expected to call to the stand?
So the judge asked him, initially the judge was like, oh, you only have 3 witnesses. He said, no, I have 4 or 5 witnesses and I may call a few more. I think he's playing it by ear. He's seeing what the conversation is because, he's trying to get his client off of these charges. And I'll also add that at the end of the hearing yesterday, he actually asked for the judge to dismiss the case. He said, the prosecution had not proven their case to this point. The judge said, no, I'll see you here tomorrow. But he did try to go that route. So he has at least 4 to 5 witnesses he's expected to bring on the stand. He also talked about how he has a ton of evidence, 70 exhibits at least that he wants to present to the jurors. And they're going to go through that today, and the prosecution will object where they want to, and the defense will present it all, and the jurors will have a chance to see kind of their side of the story here. So it should get interesting these next few days.
It is, and we always warn our viewers that this is a very complex case, and you are really seeing that unfold in court. A lot of obviously sensitive adult material, details being shared as well, so we just want to warn that it is disturbing to some. Also, the child endangerment charges moving forward based on testimony about the couple's daughter. I feel like they haven't spent a ton of time on those charges. Do our legal analysts believe that we'll get to to that at some point?
Well, so the defense attorney, John Carroll, he actually brought that up yesterday. He said, you have not proven that my client was guilty of child abuse charges. Where are the experts on that? And the prosecution came back and said, well, by the means alone that the 4-year-old was inside the home when all of this unfolded, while there were weapons in the home, she says that proves her child abuse charge there. So I'm going to ask Frank about that during the 1 o'clock or the 12:30 lunch break that the jurors get. But that was what the prosecution said, but the defense also pointed out that was a concern to him as well.
Not only weapons in the home, but present at the time of the killings in the basement, a 4-year-old child. That is extremely disturbing. So we'll see what happens today as the defense presents its case. Again, day 6, we're expected to cover this for 4 weeks. And I know people are, thinking 4 weeks, what possibly could be coming down the pike? But I mean, they expected this time frame for a reason, and maybe we'll see that from the defense.
Yeah, and John Carroll said that he expects his evidence sharing that he's expected to do starting today, and he said that could go for several days. So just the evidence alone, we're not even talking about calling witnesses to the stand, and then you add in 4 to 5 witnesses. I mean, yesterday we saw Iris there up on the stand the entire day.
Hours. Yeah, for hours, for much of the day.
And the day before.
And the day before, really getting into the nooks and cranny of blood pattern and Sophie, our digital producer, giving us insight that the jurors seem to sort of be in and out as far as their attention span. But I think Frank spoke to that, right? And Tom, our legal analyst, that a lot of this is very just like the nitty gritty, kind of like science-y. But I think what we got out of that is important. And what we got out of that is the prosecutors really trying to suggest that the body and the movement of what the first responders came to, that they were moved or staged.
Yeah, and I think it's important to go back to those opening statements. Actually, let's take you inside the courtroom. It does look like the judge is up there on the stand and they are about to get started again.